welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurs and Fuego. I have the distinct pleasure to have my main man right here, Ben Reikert from Gameco. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
I always wanted to meet someone who gets paid to play games, man.
Me too.
Tell us a little bit more what you do, man.
That was kind of a dream of mine as well. Growing up, I obviously played a lot of video games. I'm kind of that generation. And I actually didn't go in the direction of games initially. I have a master's in international relations. My father's German, so I spent a lot of time in Europe. Did my master's actually abroad. So when I started off my career, I was actually in public relations in Brussels, Belgium. At one point I just said, you know what, this is cool and all, but I want to get back to kind of my roots of having fun, being a bit more entrepreneurial. So about 4 years ago, I said, let's leave, let's come back to the US. We settled here in Phoenix, out of all places, but we love it, my wife loves it. And got into games. And that was kind of it. I just said, let's do games. So I started first doing online kind of press stuff about games, reviewing them. Then I hooked up with the University of, ASU, so the Arizona State University, helped them set up a Center for Games and Impact there. So kind of crossing my my kind of ideals of social work in a way and games. So there's this whole kind of concept of games for impact or games for change, which are games that you play they're entertaining and all, but what they do is they create a story that captivates you to help you learn about something, a conflict in the world or education.
That's pretty cool. Ben Reikert from Gameco, man. And who would have thunk here in Phoenix, Arizona, you're an incubator for gamers, right?
Yeah, we are.
That's exactly who you, and of all the places, like you said, I mean, of all the places in the world, here we have this incubator. What's the reception? I mean, how do people find out about you? Other than, of course, through Entrepreneurs and Fuego, through your public relations. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, how do people find out? I mean, nobody moves to Arizona to be incubated for games.
Well, not until we started.
Until you started,
yeah. We've had some people move here specifically from the East Coast and other places just to be in the incubator program. And you know, so to continue a little bit, when I was at ASU, I found that there was this really interesting and creative community here of game developers, but they were very grassroots, very independent. There were larger studios here in the past that one way or another went away or imploded a bit. So there was kind of this leftover, I always like to call it a nutrient-rich carcass of game development talent here in the Valley, right? Which paints this kind of picture of, wow, something could be mined out of this, right? And so I started to interact more with the community on a kind of a day-to-day basis, and that's eventually where my previous business partner and I, Joseph Darnell, started Gameco on this idea of let's create a co-working space specifically for game developers.
For game developers.
Basically, stick a flag in the ground and hope they come. Right?
And they did.
They did. So we started to offer more because, you know, our minimal viable product of a desk, chair, and Wi-Fi only goes so far for some of them.
Sure.
We started to see the kind of the pain points that they had about running a business, about being a sustainable game developer, not just working a business, you know, a IT job during the day and then at night kind of moonlighting and making games. So we tried to bring in other parts of the community of Phoenix, and that I think is where the strength has come, is this connection of the underground talent of game developers that's here, and then all of the other kind of startup business help and the community that's around here that's really, really embracing about what we're trying to do.
This show is about the journey of an entrepreneur. And, you know, Gameco is just exploding. It's really blowing up here in Phoenix. What was your journey like? I mean, because one of the things that we were saying off the camera is that, you know, part of the aim of the show is to deglamorize the idea, Ben, that, all right, all these gamers, these guys got to be pulling up in their Rolls Royces and their, you know, Ferraris and everything else, but it doesn't happen that way, right? I mean, it's a lot of freaking work, man.
Yeah, and, you know, even from, like I said myself, I'm not coming from games as such, the industry. I'm coming from as a gamer, right, and wanting to get into games. And so I had to learn, you know, what it takes to run a business, what it takes to make a game, what it takes to bring people together around a common idea and be productive about that.
And how did you learn that? Because there's no school that teaches you this in particular until you
Yeah.
came with the idea. So
Right.
how did you learn that?
Yeah, again, all grassroots. It's just,
Okay.
one thing that I like to do basically is I like to meet people. I like to better myself. So I'm big about self-improvement. I'm big about, obviously leading a good balanced
Right.
lifestyle.
Right.
Not too much excess, but at the same time, being successful at this, at what I do and enjoying it. And so this is kind of this, again, my personal private journey that I explain to the people who come into the incubator or the people I meet.
Yeah.
And I think that connects really well with them. And they say, okay, this kind of, like you said, de-glamorized it.
Right.
It makes it real, it makes it tangible, and I think I can do this.
And when you make it tangible, you make it real, then people identify with you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now I get the idea that it's not, I take the blue pill and boom,
Right.
tomorrow, all right, things are going to happen.
Right.
But it's a patience game, right?
Oh yeah. And a lot of it, again, being an incubator, a lot of what we deal with, sure, we talk about business, we talk about legal, we talk about finance, we talk about marketing, all that stuff, but in the end of the day, these are people that we're dealing with.
Is the success ratio in the game industry and where you are any different than in the regular business world? Because here in the business, you go into business, you got an 85% chance of failing.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
How about in the gaming industry? Is it kind of the same, or is it higher, or is it low? What do you see?
I don't know a percentage like 85,
Right.
but it's probably, I would say, harder. Because it is entertainment, it is a hits-driven industry, right? And
Yep.
people, it comes and goes. It's a lot about
It's very fickle, I would imagine.
Oh.
It is entertaining
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
but tomorrow somebody else came up with something else,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, okay, that's
Right.
I'm not
Even
playing
2
that
hours
anymore.
later, right? I mean, yeah, it's tough, and it is a lot about copyright and intellectual property
Sure.
and understanding that, which a lot of creatives just want to make, just want
Right.
to do,
Right.
and they want to go from creative to creative to creative, and that taking that time to understand that to be sustainable with it, they need to do more than that, right?
Is that the biggest challenge, though, that you find trying to educate the gamers that okay, this is what the reality is, and I'm going to give it to you straight.
Yeah, in all honesty, yes. Yeah, and that's where working at the university right now at the University of Advancing Technology, where I'm a professor.
Yep.
I teach game production, so I don't do necessarily. I work a bit with design because that makes sense, right, with marketing and production. But art-wise and programming, I'm not. I don't dive into that. What I do is try to tell them. All of those need to be complemented with this idea and this concept that you want to be sustainable. So what does that require?
Right. Well, if you had to tell your class right now, there's 3 things that a game must have to be a success and to be a hit. What are those 3 things?
Well, they definitely have to be entertaining.
Right.
Right. I mean, not all games have to be fun, but majority we try to do that. Right. You definitely need to know that there's an audience. Right. Is there an audience for what you're doing at all, except for you and your buddy and your parents? Okay, great. You got $50 maybe there, right? Sustain a living on $50.
Right.
And I think the other one is just you also have to make sure that, as technical as it is, you have passion and you keep the fun going while you're creating it. And I think that's for every startup, right? I mean, you need it needs to be part of what you enjoy, your identity, and also that people will see through that, right? If you don't have that kind of connection or that passion to it, or if you don't, again, we're making games, so if it's not fun to make the game, it's not going to be fun to play the game.
Very, very good point. What has been your biggest challenge as an entrepreneur? Because it's not all fun and games, pun intended.
Right.
But you have to have some obstacles that people don't realize that you go through as an entrepreneur in the gaming business that you overcome somehow.
Yeah.
What are those, or what is it, and how do you overcome it?
Sure. I think be a bit more broad about it, but life is made up of choices, right? And so when you especially when you're your own boss, which I know a lot of people come to me and say, I don't want to be my boss. I don't want to work for anybody, right? Okay, but do you know what that means, right?
Exactly.
So it's every day prioritizing and understanding what it is that I'm prioritizing. And I do a lot of thinking and meditating on that regularly and say, what is it that I want to achieve now? What does it want to achieve in the future? And I'm not the only person here too.
Right.
So how does that all fit in? And I need to be, and I constantly, again, think about this as, what am I grateful for as I go along? Because it's not just me too. It's everybody else, and I get things from people or from from other resources that I just can't do alone, and I need to remind myself that it's a holistic effort like that.
Ben Reikert from Gameco Labs, man. I mean, you're really blowing it up here in Phoenix, and
Thanks.
you've put Phoenix on the map. You got people from the East Coast, man, coming in here.
Yeah.
And I want to be a gamer. I want to develop these games.
Yeah.
Have you seen one of the students, somebody that walked in, and after about a week, it just impressed you with his technical prowess, perhaps, or with his imagination, his or?
Yeah, constantly. That's the thing.
That's gotta be cool, though.
Yeah,
That's gotta be cool
just to do a few shout outs, like in the game collab, we had Tristan Moore and his wife Abby, who they came in with this game called Grave that they had created actually in a game jam, which is what we're hosting this weekend. We're doing the global game jam over at UAT this weekend. It's 48 hours, jam on a game, kind of like a hackathon or any kind of thing, startup weekend. They created a game like this kind of interesting horror game with no real violence in it. You don't attack or anything, you just use light. And so they created this in this 48 hours and continued to make that. And they did a successful Kickstarter campaign, and now they're just kind of blowing it up. And they decided to also work on a new one called Reflections, which is kind of more of a relationship game where you're playing it and you make life choices. And as you do that, the game changes. And they were just in the Smithsonian showing that off actually 2 weeks ago. So
that's
that kind of stuff is awesome. And that kind of stuff is what we need to be telling the story about here in Phoenix. And beyond, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gender-wise, more males, less females, more females, less male, what is it?
Yeah, I think traditionally, again, it's been mostly male-dominated as an industry.
Yep.
But again, looking at my students, I have a pretty good number of women and girls in my classes that are really just doing phenomenal jobs at all levels. So whether it's an artist to a project leader to a programmer.
Here's the neat thing about you. You're either cool or you're not. And you are cool because you're doing cool stuff, man.
I do the stuff I enjoy, right? So if I like it, then I get excited by it, and other people hopefully get excited by it too. So.
And it shows, because it shows your passion, and it shows the passion that you have for the people that you're teaching, that you're actually incubating, man.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been great.
I appreciate it, man. This is really cool. This is really cool. This is. If I rub enough coolness, maybe I'll be cool too. I guess it'll happen, man, someday. Hopefully.
Oh, that's cool. It's cool. This is a cool place, man.
There you go.
You got it already. I don't know. You got it already. So I'm going to have to come here more often.
Mi casa es su casa, man.
Thank you.
You got it, man.
Thank
and
you.
with that, we're out.
Welcome to the remix. Prestige.